For over 200 years, one single family, the Mughals, completely dominated the Indian subcontinent. We're talking about an empire of staggering wealth, one that created some of the most breathtaking art and architecture the world has ever seen. But it's also a story of a dramatic and pretty quick collapse. So let's get into it.
And that's the big question, right? How does an empire that seems so powerful, so permanent, just fall apart? It's this incredible story of brilliant strategy and visionary politics on one hand, and some absolutely fatal mistakes on the other. We're going to break down exactly how it all went down.
All right, so let's start at the beginning. And the story of the Mughals begins not with a whisper, but with a bang. And I mean that literally. It all starts with a warrior prince from Central Asia who came armed with some game-changing new technology.
Okay, so this invader's name was Babur. And let's just say he had conquest in his blood. He was a descendant of both Timur and Genghis Khan. Talk about a family tree, right? But he wasn't just some guy looking for glory. He was actually getting pushed out of his own turf in Central Asia. So he looks south, towards India, and sees that the ruling Delhi Sultanate is a total mess. Weak, divided, and just ripe for the taking. And he had an ace up his sleeve, gunpowder.
So picture this, the First Battle of Panipat. The Sultan of Delhi, Ibrahim Lodi, shows up with this enormous traditional army. We're talking war elephants, thousands and thousands of soldiers, the whole deal. Babur is completely outnumbered. On paper, it should have been a slaughter. But Babur's cannons and guns were totally new to the battlefield in India. Just the sound they made sent Lodi's elephants into a panic, and they literally turned around and trampled their own troops.
But here's the thing. It wasn't just about having better tech. It was about how he used it. Babur was a brilliant tactician. He used this classic pincer movement, the Tulughma, where he split his small army to surround Lodi's huge force. Imagine getting blasted by cannons from the front, and then suddenly, cavalry is hitting you from both sides and the rear. It was absolutely devastating. In a single day, the Delhi Sultanate was history, and the Mughal Empire was born.
So Babur kicked the door down, but it was really his grandson, Akbar, who built the house. See, Akbar understood something crucial. You can't just rule by the sword. If you want an empire to last, you need stability, you need inclusion, and you need really smart government.
So what was his playbook? Well, it was a three-part masterstroke. First, he turned his enemies into family. He married into the powerful Rajput warrior clans, turning potential threats into loyal allies. Second, he reached out to the huge non-Muslim population by getting rid of a really unpopular tax and promoting a policy of universal peace. And third, he built a meritocracy. Your rank and your job depended on how good you were, not who your father was. It made the whole administration way more effective.
And this is where the real secret sauce was. Boring old administration. Akbar's government set up this incredibly sophisticated and fair land tax system. It was predictable, it was efficient, and it created a steady flood of cash into the treasury. That financial backbone is what would pay for the empire's golden age for the next 100 years.
So, with the empire peaceful and the bank accounts full, what do? Well, if you're a Mughal emperor, you start building beautiful things. This is when that stability unleashed one of the greatest artistic booms in history.
Akbar's son, Jahangir, was a huge art lover. Under his rule, Mughal painting became famous for its incredible, lifelike detail. But it was his son Shah Jahan who decided to think bigger, way bigger. He wasn't interested in paintings on a page. He was interested in creating buildings that would take your breath away.
And they weren't kidding when they called his reign the golden age of Mughal architecture. I mean, come on, the Taj Mahal? That was him. The massive, stunning red fort in Delhi? Also him. He basically defined the look of the empire. All that gleaming white marble and unbelievably intricate artwork. But, and you knew there was a but coming, all this incredible beauty came with a massive price tag. The sheer cost of these projects, plus some expensive wars down south, started to seriously drain that treasury that Akbar had so carefully built up. The Golden Age was, ironically, sowing the seeds of its own destruction. And that brings us to the most complicated and controversial emperor of them all, Aurangzeb. Now, under him, the empire actually grew to its largest size ever, but his policies were going to push the whole structure to its absolute breaking point.
Aurangzeb was a deeply devout Orthodox Muslim, and he basically took Akbar's successful playbook and just ripped it to shreds. That tax on non-Muslims that Akbar got rid of, Aurangzeb brought it back. That whole policy of tolerance and inclusion, gone.
He completely alienated key allies like the Rajputs, who had been a pillar of Mughal strength for a century. It was a total reversal of what had made the empire work.
And at the very same time, he got completely obsessed with conquering the South. He spent the last 25 years of his life and reign stuck in this endless, draining, unwinnable war in the Deccan. It became known as the Deccan Ulcer, a wound that just kept bleeding the empire of money, soldiers, and morale.
So by the end of his long reign, the empire was facing a perfect storm. You had the Marathas in the south running circles around the massive Mughal army. You had former allies like the Rajputs, Jats, and Sikhs all in open revolt, and inside the empire, the economy was a nightmare. There wasn't enough land to give out to pay the nobles, and the peasants were being taxed into poverty to pay for the wars. The system was breaking. So when Aurangzeb finally died in 1707, he left behind this huge but incredibly fragile empire. And without his iron will to hold it all together, the cracks he created just shattered the whole thing. And it happened shockingly fast.
Just look at how quickly it all unraveled. The second Aurangzeb dies, his sons start fighting each other for the throne, completely weakening the government. Within just a couple of decades, huge regions like the Marathas and Sikhs just break away. And then comes the knockout blow. In 1739, the Persian ruler Nadir Shah invades, sacks Delhi, and walks away with a mind-boggling amount of treasure. For all practical purposes, the Mughal Empire was done.
The collapse of this huge central power left a giant power vacuum. Suddenly, India was a patchwork of smaller competing states. And that chaos created the perfect opening for a new player on the scene, the British East India Company. This trading company had its own army and big ambitions. The fall of the Mughals directly paved the way for the rise of the British Raj.
So the empire is long gone, but the Mughal legacy is absolutely everywhere in South Asia, in the food, the language, the architecture, and even in the complicated politics of today. And that leaves us with a final question to think about. When you look at the world they built and the world they left behind, what part of their incredible, complicated story do you think truly matters the most today?